Welcome. Welcome to the Intellectual Property and Trade Nexus podcast. Welcome. Podcast. Welcome. Podcast. Welcome. We will take few minutes of music before we begin. So we encourage you to tune in and listen. We're taking few minutes of music before we begin. Mhm. 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 Okay. Mhm. Okay. Hello to all. Welcome to the Intellectual Property and Trade Nexus podcast. Wherever you are following from, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are following us from. Uh, welcome, welcome, welcome. So we will begin briefly, but before we begin, I would like to give some acknowledgement to some of those in my life, academically, those that have uh, furnished me with information, have given me knowledge, have shared their experiences with me. So I want to acknowledge Mr. Anthony Topman. I want to acknowledge someone very special. So I want to acknowledge Mr. Anthony Topman, who happens to be one of my lecturer during my master uh, in Turin. Mr. Anthony Topman is the Director of Intellectual Property, Government Procurement and Competition Division at the World Trade Organization. And I received this handbook on the TRIPS agreement from him, which was edited by him, Hannah Weigel. You show this to you. Okay, it's okay. So it was edited by him, Anthony Tubman, Hannah Weigel, and Jayashree Watal. So these are staff from the World Trade Organization. So I met him quite recently at the World Trade Organization when I visited there, and he gave me this handbook. So it's a handbook on a WTO trade-related aspect, the WTO trade-related aspect of intellectual property rights. So he gave me this book, and it basically covers all things intellectual property and WTO. This would be the handbook for the IP and Trade Nexus podcast because we are going to be dealing with both intellectual property related and trade issues. So this is one of our resources. So thank you, Mr. Anthony Topman from the WTO. We appreciate your offer. Thank you for the handbook on the WTO TRIPS agreement. We appreciate the work you did with your colleagues for having this. And so we want to extend our thanks and gratitude having received this handbook. And we'll basically be using it on our podcast to share information on how intellectual property intertwines with international trade. And thank you. Thank you, Mr. Topman. And it was not only this book that he gave me, he also gave me the Constitution, the Magna Carta of International Trade Governance. So he also gave me the Magna Carta of International Trade Governance, which has to do with the World Trade Agreements, the Marrakesh Agreement establishing the World Trade Organization and its actnesses. So actnesses on government procurement, competition, and other actnesses of the World Trade Organization. So thank you, Mr. Anthony Topman. Passed through to visit, and I was fortunate to have received this from you. I visited my Deritio family as well as my Y YPO family in Geneva, and I'm now back home, back on base to continue my podcast. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the gift. I just want to acknowledge the hard work you guys do for us, specifically to Mr. Anthony Topman of the World Intellectual Property and Competition Division. And lastly, after he gave me the two books, so acknowledging for the two books, the WTO Magna Carta, the Constitution of the WTO and International Trade Governance. This is why I consider this to be. And so this is the WTO agreements and the Marrakesh agreements. This is it. And he also gave me this, the handbook on the WTO TRIPS agreement. So I always also like to acknowledge uh, Professor Coty from the World Trade Institute. He was also my professor during my study at the University of Turin. Professor Cotier was very instrumental in my study back then, and he basically recommended that this identical book. So Professor Cotier recommended that we read this identical book. He lectured about the historicity of international economics, and some institutions, some countries have adopted the approach of uh, the extractive industry approach, where they extracted resources from their territorial confinement, and other countries have adopted a different approach, which is to ensure economic governance and sustainability. So he's basically in this book that he recommended for us to follow, Why Nations Fail. So Why Nations Fail was a recommendation from Professor Cotier, and basically it speaks to the economic uh, the historicity of economics, international trade, and how the approaches developing countries and developed countries use economic sustainability, and they succeed in showing that they invest in their countries, in their people, and why developing, least developed, and other poor countries used the extractive method. So thank you, Professor Cotier. I just wanted to do this acknowledgement before I begin the podcast. So thank you, guys. Very essential to me, those that have impacted my life and continue to make a critical contribution to how we move forward from the academic background, from those from international organizations, have cultivated a sense of guidance and providing leadership and guidance to us. So thank you guys. Now we move straight into the subject matter for today, which happens to be the World in the World Trade Organization accession and post-accession implementation. So this is going to be our discussion for today. We'll be discussing the the World Trade Organization accession and post-accession implementation. So before we begin, we will want to give a brief explanation as to what is the World Trade Organization. So the World Trade Organization was established in 1995 through the Uruguay round that lasted from 1986 to 1994. So the Uruguay round was one of those global discussion after World War II that countries felt that in order to graduate from world wars and in order to rebuild, in order to fight against poverty, destruction, and underdevelopment, diseases, and all the consequences of World War II, there were several discussions being held, and the Uruguay round happens to be one of those discussions. And basically, the issue was to establish an organization that will cultivate the essence of international trade globally. And this organization will be used as a catalyst. That trade was going to be used as a catalyst within the confine, within the structure of this organization to improve economic growth and development. Because after World War II, most of the nations were partially or most of these nations were destroyed, development were pushed back. So there were a lot of issues that needed to be addressed in terms of all those destruction, uh, engaging in development activities is going to rebuild, reorganize the government, and diseases, migration, destruction, and all of the consequences that the World War II brought to, to us globally as a people, as a nation, as a country, and as a war in general. So the Uruguay round discussion sought to ensure that this organization, the World Trade Organization, was going to be established to use trade as a catalyst for economic growth and development. So basically, the World Trade Organization is a global system for trade rules and is intended to raise living standards, job creation, economic advancement, development, and all the, the benefits of engaging in international trade. So the purpose. That's the purpose and the function of the World Trade Organization. So now that we know what we have a surface knowledge of what the World Trade Organization is and what the purpose of this was back then and is today, we now like to move to WTO accession. So WTO accession is basically the process of joining the World Trade Organization gaining membership, being a full-fledged member of the World Trade Organization. So the process of joining or gaining membership with the World Trade Organization is what we call accession. Accession in practical terms mean to add. So if somebody when if a nation or a custom territory wanted to become or to be added to the WTO, have to go through the accession process. So the accession process is the process that ensures a country or a custom territory becomes a full-fledged member of the World Trade Organization. So Article 12 of the WTO agreement, I'll just go to it quickly to be verbatimly. So this is the World Trade Organization agreements, basically the Marrakech Agreement establishing the World Trade Organization and its annexes. So this will be our reference for most of the topics that we'll be discussing that is trade related, and we'll have another reference for intellectual property in the soonest possible time. So to go quickly into the WTO agreement on accession, which I want to read verbatimly, is Article 12. Article 12. This is Article 12 of the agreement. So let me just read it quickly. Any state or separate custom territory possessing full autonomy in the conduct of its external commercial relations and of other matters provided in this agreement and the multilateral trade agreement may accede to this agreement on terms to be agreed between it and the WTO. Such accession shall apply to this agreement and the multilateral trade agreements annexed thereto. Decisions on number two, decisions on accession shall be taken by the ministerial conference. The ministerial conference shall approve the agreement on the terms of accession by two-thirds majority of the members of the WTO. Three, accession to plurality agreement. Accession to plurilateral trade agreement shall be governed by the provisions of the agreement. So this is the article within the World Trade Agreement that discusses what it takes to accede or become a member of the World Trade Organization. So Article 12 describes what it entails to become a full-fledged member of the World Trade Organization. So who can apply for WTO membership? Who who is who or what is eligible for WTO membership? Who can apply? So it's a state membership. So countries can apply. Any state that have interest in becoming a member of the World Trade Organization can apply. Any authority custom authority with full-fledged autonomy to conduct its trade policies. So there are customs authority within regions like EFTA, AFTA. There are different custom authorities around the world. So who can apply for WTO membership? You have to be a state, a country, a nation, or a custom authority that have autonomy to conduct trade policies. So you are within a specific region, and all those member states within that region give you authority to conduct trade policy regulation. Then you become a full-fledged and recognized custom authority. But let's focus on state or countries because most of the WTO members are countries, and the WTO have a lot of members, 164, if I'm not mistaken, personally. The WTO have 164 member states. So you are a state or you are a custom authority, you thereby becomes eligible because you have the authority, the autonomy to conduct your own trade policies. That's the requirement. So what is the process of seeking accession to the WTO? What is the process? What it requires? I'm a member, I am a custom authority, I am a state, I want to gain accession to the World Trade Organization. What is the process or the stipulated process layout that I need to use to become a member of the World Trade Organization? So you need to make a request. You need to make a request to the World Trade Organization expressing your interest in being a member, expressing your interest in being a member or gaining membership to the World Trade Organization. So you have to submit a formal request for accession. It's a formal request for accession. You are a nation, you are a country, or a custom authority. You want to join the World Trade Organization, you have to submit a formal request of accession to the World Trade Organization, specifically the WTO General Council. So the WTO General Council will be the appropriate body to submit your request for accession. So as a country, as a republic, you have expressed interest in joining the WTO. You submit your request of accession to the WTO, specifically to the General Council. The General Council then will receive your request and then establish a working party. And this working party then will be responsible to review your request and submit the findings to the General Council for approval. So that is the case. You want to join the World Trade Organization. So this is the accession, the WTO accession process. The WTO is an international trading body. They administer trade governance globally. The WTO was established in 1995 through arrangement of the Uruguay round that lasted from 1986 to 1994 after the end of World War II, seeking resolution on how to improve development, to rebuild, to fight against diseases, but to particularly use trade as a catalyst to improve economic growth and development, And so the WTO then is a global system of trade rules intended to raise living standard and create jobs. Article 12 of the WTO agreement states that if you are a nation or a custom authority and wish to join the WTO, you have to have an autonomy to conduct trade policy within a specific territorial confinement, be it a state or a custom authority, be it within a state or a region, but you have authority to conduct trade policies, regulation, or administration. You then begin a process by making an official request for accession. This submission of the official request for accession, you move to Geneva, Switzerland, and submit this request for accession to the General Council, which is the highest decision-making body at the WTO, the General Council or the Ministerial Conference, and submit your request for accession. The General Council of the WTO then will review will establish a working party to review your request and submit a funding after reviewing your request to the General Council for approval. So that's the first stage of the accession, to give you an understanding of the purpose of the accession and how it works, what it entails. So after the submission of your request for WTO membership, the General Council have established a working party. The working party have reviewed your request and submitted a funding. The next stage is the submission. Submitted, okay, the working party review your request for accession, submitted a funding for approval to the General Council. After that, the next stage is the submission of a memorandum of foreign trade regime. The submission of memorandum of foreign trade regime. That's the second stage after the request for accession to the WTO have been approved by the General Council. So the request of memorandum for foreign trade regime basically is that the applicant government or the applicant custom authority, but in this case, let's say in this example would be the applicant government will present a memorandum basically detailing all aspects of its trade and legal regime to the working party. So I'm Republic X. I have interest. I have submitted my request for accession. The next stage, which has to do with the submission of memorandum of foreign trade regime, is basically a memorandum or documentation covering all aspects of trade and legal regime that I have within country X to the working party. So the memorandum will form the basis for fact checking and funding for the working party. This submission will ensure that this is the foundation. This memorandum will collect all information pertaining to your trading regime, domestically, but particularly foreign trade. Within your foreign trade, there might be some domestic information that will be captured, but the concentration is your foreign trade regime. So you basically provide all this information on how country X trades uh, internationally. The working party want to have an understanding on how country X or Republic X trades. And so, on that basis, the funding then will form the basis for a fact funding on the working party. Uh, then, when the working party have done their fact finding to ascertain as to whether the information provided by Republic X uh, needs more clarity, there are more inquiries to be made. The working party then will host several meetings to examine uh, the questions, some of the issues that were raised by some of the issues that are raised from their fundings, and also members then the general membership of the derivative will have access to the memorandum of foreign trade regime also. So there will be questions coming from the general membership of the WTO as well as the working party. So the working party basically are other member states within the WTO that the general council has maybe appointed and say maybe Brazil, Angola, Chile, France. So these member states will then become the working party. They will have their questions to pose, and other members of the WTO will also have inquiries. Member states that maybe you have done business with in the past, or you are already engaged in business with, and they have some issues and they want to address to you, or for you to be able to resolve or to make an input. So then the working party will arrange meetings to address all the queries and the questions raised in the memorandum of foreign trade. Then the next stage has to do with the conditions for entry. So the asylum, that, before moving forward, just to make this point, so the accession to the WTO is not an automatic process like other international organizations like the World Bank, IMF, and all these other institutions like membership. So long you are a member of a UN organization, maybe you are a member of UN, and an organization happens to be a member of the UN, then being a member automatically makes you a member of that organization. Like in the case of the World Health Organization, World Food, uh, uh, WRPO, other UN organizations that the Guinea membership doesn't not it is not automatic, or it doesn't take lesser time. Guinea membership into the WTO is a very Herculean task, and it takes years upon years. Some countries 5, 10, 20. It takes years. So for my experience working with Liberia, I think we took about 8 to 9 years. 8 to 9 years for Liberia to become a full-fledged member of the World Trade Organization. So going forward, so it's a very difficult thing. It requires a lot of commitment, a lot of resources, lot of investment. You have to find the appropriate technical people, the technocrats to engage in that process. The government had to set aside a budget to support all the trips from capital to Geneva. In the case of Liberia, we were very fortunate to have the Swedish government support. So the Swedish government supported the accession process, and leading up to the post-accession stage of Liberia accession to the World Trade Organization. So I'm a witness. I was a member of the technical working group for WTO accession and post-accession implementation, headed by the chief negotiator, Mr. Axel Ade, and the deputy chief negotiator on behalf of Liberia, Mr. Steve Tuwen Marvey. So these were the technocrats that headed the team from the Ministry of Commerce, although we have others from related trade ministry and institution, justice, and all of that. But when it comes to post-accession implementation, I will speak of that. But that moves to the next stage, the conditions of entry, the conditions of entries. So after you have made a request, you have submitted your memorandum of foreign trade regime, then you need to meet the entry conditions set by the World Trade Organization in order to move to the next stage of accession. So what are the conditions for entry? So the terms of conditions include commitments to observe the WTO rules. So that's the first condition. If you want to be a member of the World Trade Organization, you want to join this global trading body, you want to be a participant of the global trading system and administering the multilateral trading governance domestically and internationally. You need to meet the WTO rules, the WTO requirements, the existing rule on the books. You have to meet all of them. You have to meet all the disciplines of the WTO, the rules and disciplines of the WTO. You need to meet them in order to proceed with your accession process. So in this period of accession, in this transition from a non-WTO member to an applicant government and going through the accession process, this transitional period require that you observe, you commit to observing all WTO rules and disciplines. So that means you have what that entails, what that means, what when we say you need to observe, you need to commit to WTO rules and discipline. What that means in plain terms is you need to your domestic regulations, your domestic regulations, policies, laws. You need to ensure that during this transition period of the accession stage, that you legislate and you make structural changes to implement the WTO commitments. So you legislate. The conditions of entry is that you observe and commit to following all WTO rules and disciplines through the legislation of laws, uh, the, the, the ratifications of laws, of trade laws, trade rules, trade regulations. You have to undertake the necessary reforms to your trade policy, to your trade regime, to ensure that you adapt, that your domestic trade, your regulations, your policy should be ratified to align in alignment with the WTO rules and regulations. And you need to ensure that you make those necessary structural changes to ensure your commitment aligns to WTO rules and policies. So these are the conditions for entry. The conditions for entry is to ensure that domestically that your laws and regulations on trade, on domestic trade, on foreign trade, on trade policies, uh, on everything trade or trade related to ensure that you comply, you align with the WTO rules and commitments. So that's the condition for entry. And if you did the necessary amendments, the reforms, and we align all your policies and regulations and laws to the WTO rules, then you move to the next stage. Uh, uh, then you can either decide to move and make this a next stage. We have to do a bilateral negotiation, or you can do the entry, the conditions. You can meet while going through the process of meeting the entry conditions. You can simultaneously be going through bilaterals. But if you want to keep your focus completely on maybe meeting the entry conditions and you want to keep your focus on that, you can also do that. But in the benefit of time to ensure that your session process doesn't take much longer, you can do the both. And the WTO allow this while going through the process of meeting the conditions of entry, aligning your laws, amending your laws, yeah, making the necessary reforms with your trade policies and your trade regimes domestically and internationally that it aligns with the WTO rules and disciplines. You can also be doing bilateral negotiations. So bilateral negotiations is wherein you are going through your accession process, but you are allowed to engage in bilateral negotiations with working party members. So members that nations, the WTO members that are part and parcel of the working party that are responsible for Republic X accession process, you can engage in bilateral with them to discuss. If you have specific interest in agriculture, you can discuss with them on how you guys can trade in agriculture. If you have specific interest in maybe investment in banking, in the service sector, in tourism, and like I said, agriculture, in investment, in intellectual property, depending on your trade specific interests, you can proceed with bilateral negotiations with members within that working party responsible for your accession as a nation. So basically, this bilateral could be like I spoke of all these sectors that are responsible for, but the concession could be made on commitment to maybe market access and goods, commitment in goods and services. So you people could derive a concession on services, on goods. Everything is open, but it's left with you as a country to make a determination on what bilateral topic you want to cover with a specific country that is member of your working party. So after that, the result of the bilateral will be consolidated into a document, and which then will form part of the final accession package. So you made a request for your accession, you have submitted the memorandum of foreign trade regime, you have met the conditions of entry, you have done bilaterals. So all these activities, all these conditions, requirements that have been met will be consolidated into a final document that that is named and called the final accession package. So the next step, let's discuss the final accession package. The final accession package is when you have met all the stipulated requirements for gaining accession, and there have been several visits to Geneva. The team, the working party from Geneva, have had several visits in capital, and the progress is being made. There are a lot of investment being made. There are policy changes. There are amendments to laws and regulations, and it's a very serious engagement, both in Geneva and both in capital. In capital is what we consider your capital city, where the decisions makers, the government, where the government sit and where decision makers can make the decision in favor of your accession process. So the accession package consists of three critical documents, which represent the result of both the multilateral arrangements you have been going through as well as the bilaterals. So that's what the final accession package is composed of. It's the result. The final accession package consists of the results of the bilateral engagement you have been made with. You made your request, you have met the requirement, you made your request for accession, you submitted your memorandum of foreign trade regime, you have met the conditions for entry, you have engaged in bilaterals. So these are the three documents that will form part of your accession package, which happens to be the final accession package. So both the multilateral and the bilateral phases results will be combined in this package. So report of the working party contain the report, the final summary report of the working party will be conditions of entry and a protocol of accession. So the report then the working party will conduct a final report that will contain the conditions of entry and the protocol of accession. And the second issue that the final accession package will cover is the schedules of market access commitment. You have specific schedule that you give to the derivative that within this time period, within this schedule, we then implement market access commitment, both in goods and services, agree between us and derivative members. So let me just basically go through, repeat the accession package once again. So the accession package will consist of three critical documents, which represents they result from the multilateral and the bilateral phases. The multilateral phase where when you express your request for accession and you met and the general council of the territory established the working party, and the working party conducted their reviews and provided fundings to the general council that your accession request should be approved. You move to the next stage, you submitted a memorandum of foreign trade regime. You met the condition of entry and you conducted, so you met the condition of entry. So that's the multilateral phase. Then the bilateral phase is where you discuss with working party members on specific commitments made within goods and services depending on your trade interest. So the report of the working party will be contained in the summary of proceedings and conditions of entry and a protocol of accessions. Then the schedules of market access commitments in goods and services agreed between you and other WTO members. So that is what the accession package will contain. So approval of the accession package. Approval of the accession package. So you have combined all the documents, you have provided all the results. So now you have to go back to the General Council or the Ministerial Conference, the highest decision making body within the WTO to get the final stamp of approval before moving forward. So the working party will present a draft report on the protocol of accession and the market access commitment in goods and services. So these two documents that are in the final accession package will be presented to the General Council or at the Ministerial Conference, or to the Ministerial Conference. These are two bodies that make the decisions. And so the General Council then will do based on the outcome will make a determination to do an adoption at the final meeting. And when that adoption is done, then the General Council or the Ministerial Conference will adopt and approve. Will adopt and approve your final accession package. So that's the approval stamp from the General Council of the WTO. So this body authorized, the General Council authorized to go through all your accession stages through being furnished with reports from the working body that it established from the very beginning of your accession. We then adopt and make a final approval. When your membership as an applicant government have been adopted and approved, you will be accepted. The protocol of accession will then mean that you have been accepted as a new entrant into the WTO. So the protocol of accession will then state that Republic X has underwent all the requirements stipulated or spelled out by the WTO for accession, and we now approve we now adopt and approve its membership. So you are no more longer an applicant than you've gone somewhere, you're making headway. I can still recall during the stages of Liberia accession process and Guinea accession. It was quite critical, 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 critical achievement. Critical achievement. So the protocol of accession of a new entrant stating that the applicant government accedes to the WTO. You have met all the requirements. The WTO General Council then adopts and approves your membership. However, however, don't be too excited. You still got some further obligations to meet. So Guinea full-fledged membership. Guinea full-fledged membership. So the applicant government now, this accession of the protocol, the protocol of accession that have been adopted and approved by the General Council will then be submitted to the applicant government to express, to affix that signature. So all the authorities responsible, president, minister of commerce, the final accession is the president. So the president of Republic X will affix his or her signature to the final protocol of accession, stating that they accept, they accept to be a full-fledged member of the WTO. Approve the approve the accession package. So that accession package that have been sent to the country and been signed by the applicant government will now need to be ratified by their parliament or their legislature. So you have the General Council have adopted and approved, send that protocol accession to the applicant government, the president or the authority in charge of signing will affix a signature to that document and send it to their parliament for ratification. When the ratification is done, it will be sent back to Geneva through the appropriate channels to the WTO, and the General Council will then receive it and announce. Maybe an official day will be set aside. Then the president and our delegation will move to the WTO to be officially confirmed as a full-fledged WTO member that have responsibility, obligations, and rights and privileges as a full-fledged WTO member. So this is the process. This is the process. And to add that rectification should be done within 3 months. So you have a very shortened period that after you have signed the protocol of accession, you move strictly to the parliament, and this case should not be uh, um, there should be no filibustering involved in signing this document. So it should be very fast. Within 3 months period by the WTO, ratification is done, is sent to the parliament, and everything is agreed upon. And that ends the accession phase. So before moving to before moving to the post-accession implementation, I would like to highlight that just a summary. Let me just do a summary. So you are a nation, you are a state, You have or custom authority, you have autonomy to conduct trade policy review, trade policy regulation or administration within a specific region or territorial confinement. As a nation, you are eligible to be a member of the World Trade Organization. If you want to express your interest in becoming a full-fledged member, you submit to the World Trade Organization office in Geneva or request for accession, your accession request. You submit a request for accession. The WTO, the specific body responsible for that request is the General Council of the WTO, which is the highest decision-making body within the WTO. So the General Council then will, based on your request, will establish a working party responsible for your accession. When that working party is established, you move to the next phase where you submit a memorandum of foreign trade regime, basically stating on how, giving specific details on how you have been trading internationally. There will also be domestic information, how you trade domestically, but the concentration and focus will be on your international or your foreign trade regime. When that is done, the next phase is to meet the conditions of entry into the WTO or becoming the WTO member. This is the process. But there are certain conditions that are spelled out that you need to meet in order to move further with your accession process. These conditions is to ensure you align your trade policies, your trade legislation, laws, regulations, policies. You need to align all of them with WTO rules and disciplines and meet WTO commitments. So all your laws, your trade laws and trade related laws and regulations need to be aligned with WTO rules and disciplines. Then you meet the requirement of entry. When that is done, or simultaneously, you can be going through bilateral negotiations with members of the working party that have been established to proceed with your accession process. So you can negotiate. If there are 5 members, you can start to negotiate with these countries, determining on your specific trade interests. Your trade interests, but it's open to commitments in market access in goods and services. So if I have interest in banking services, if you have interest in tourism, if you have interest in agriculture, if you have interest in manufacturing, you can discuss those interests with the members of the working party responsible for your accession on a bilateral basis. When that requirement is met, we then move to the final accession package that is basically composed of 3 critical documents that has to do that are results of your bilateral engagement as well as your multilateral engagement. During the multilateral phase, during the bilateral phase, these 2 phases, the result for them will be included in the final accession package. And that final accession package then will be submitted. A draft report then will be done by your working party and will be submitted to the General Council for adoption and approval. If adoption and approval is done given the results and outcome of your bilateral and multilateral phases. Then the General Council will move and submit, give their approval, give their adoption and approval, and submit it to you as an applicant government. Uh, and you then will, your authority, president, prime minister, or who will affix their signature to this founder accession protocol, accepting to be a full-fledged member of the WTO. And that exception protocol, you are given 3 months to move to the parliament and ratify that accession protocol and make it a full-fledged law within your country. So after the 3 months or less than 3 months, the ratification is done. You move. There will be in Geneva, the WTO will organize a meeting where you will come to Geneva, your president, your prime minister, and then there will be an official program where all the member states, the general members state, maybe at the ministerial conference, specifically in most time is at the ministerial conference that your president, your parliament, with their dedication, inform the general WTO membership, then you'll be given the full-fledged membership and you'll be accepted into the WTO global trading body. From there, for implementation, post-accession implementation, now you are a full-fledged member of the WTO. You have obligations to fulfill. You have responsibility as a WTO member to undertake certain initiative, and you have rights and privileges. So basically, your responsibility, what could be your responsibility as a new WTO member? So now you have to implement the WTO rules and regulations. Key among them is trade facilitation, ensuring that you work closely with your trading, those in the trading sector, private sector, government institution, make trading feasible, flexible. That information should be accessible to traders. Reduce the bureaucratic bottleneck faced by traders. Reduce some of the fees and taxes to ensure that more people are encouraged to trade. Reduce the bureaucratic bottleneck for foreign trade. Ensure that when regulations are changed or when there are certain reform in policies, when certain amendments are taking place in the law, let those information be accessible to the public, whether through print or through social media or on the internet or on the website. Information should be accessible and available to the trading public to encourage more trade and reduce all the unnecessary bottlenecks that exist in streamline the trading procedures and processes to ensure that more people trade freely. And free trade, encourage free trade, particularize the essence of free trade within your trading regime and trading governance. This is one of the key responsibility. So I need one of the responsibility. Trade facilitation is one of them. So I will keep to that. So one of the privileges you will have as a member of the WTO is technical trainings. So if specifically if you are a developing or least developed country and you're a member of the WTO, you are eligible to trainings. You have to train your staff those working within the trading sector, or the revenue institutions, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, the justice system, the intellectual property office, all those trade and trade related institutions can have access to training to ensure that your technicians are immersed in what trade is, the trade laws, the trade regulations, specific trading topic, trade facilitation, trade subsidies, countervailing measure, uh, technical barriers to trade, uh, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, investment, trade and development, trade and gender, all these trade-related topics and trainings as a developing and least developed member of the World Trade Organization, you you have access to technical trainings which can be done locally by some third-party institution, or the WTO staff can move to your capital and provide the training, or your staff or your technicians can be can fly to Geneva to receive the training. And this is one of the benefits. So I just name one of your responsibility: facilitating trade successfully and encouraging trade through the trade facilitation agreement, and your privilege of technical assistance. So these are some of the benefit and responsibility of being a full-fledged member. So post-accession implementation will ensure that you cultivate a sense of being aligned with the WTO rules to encourage trade facilitation, making information accessible, reducing bureaucratic bottleneck, streamlining the trade policies and trade rules domestically and at the foreign front, and as well as benefiting from the privilege of having access to technical assistance. So this is what when we say the WTO accession or the World Trade Organization accession, becoming a member of the World Trade Organization, this is what it entails. These are the steps and processes that are required to gain full-fledged membership. But I might have discussed this maybe within 40 minutes or 1 hour, but in actuality, the WTO processes are very lengthy. Like I said, during my experience, and if I'm not mistaken, we took up 8 to 9 years or even more for Liberia to gain full-fledged membership of the WTO. So this is what I wanted to discuss with you today: the World Trade Organization accession process and post-accession implementation. And one of the responsibilities, before I go, the trade policy review mechanism. So the trade policy review mechanism happens to be one of the obligations of being a WTO member. So depending on the development in your country, maybe you're developed, you're developing or least developed country, depending on the the status of development, the economic strength of the country, the capacity of the country economic wise. Your trade policy review process could be 2 years, could be, I think for us, Liberia, or 5 years or 6, yeah, 5 years, Liberia. Uh, some countries are 6, 7 years. So depending on your economic status. And the trade policy review is basically after you have gained membership, they give you this 5 years or 7 years period to execute, to align your policies and do everything as a WTO member. So you come after 5 years or 7 years to the general body of WTO for them to ask you questions. Have you, if you never met this obligation as a WTO member, how can you address it? What progress are you making in advancing? What have been the benefits? They want to understand your experience. If you have met your obligation, why are you feeling on your obligation? What are the challenges? And how WTO can help. So it's not only pushing you to the wall to make or give your report card or grade you on the outcome of your WTO membership after that 5 or 7 years period, but also to ensure that if you are faced with challenges, they can help. Other member states can help. Other non-governmental organization can help. The WTO itself can help in ensuring that you receive the necessary tree assistance to continue being uh, an effective and efficient WTO member. So this is what I wanted to share with you guys. Let me see if I can maybe play some 1 or 2 Liberian songs before we close on this one. Mhm. So thank you for following. We appreciate your support. The RP and Trade Nexus, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you. Thanks for your support. As always, we want to acknowledge, like we did during the start of the show, Mr. Anthony Topman. We want to acknowledge our Derity of family. We want to acknowledge our WIPO family, all our network, our connections, all those we worked with in the past, being an authority or intern, going through trainings, being at WIPO, going through summer school, being at University of Geneva, and working on IP related, learning IP related subject issues, attending meetings, seminars. We extend all our thanks and appreciation to all those that have impacted our life one way or the other and continue to be a strong support, a pillar of support. We thank you. We appreciate you. We thank you. So for our constitution that we always use, today we use Article 12, which has to do with accession, and we'll continue to use it. We also have our handbook on the WTO TRIPS agreement. So we appreciate it. Thank you. We acknowledge all those that have been an impact. We acknowledge our followers and our supporters. Continue to view, continue to like, share, and leave your comment. I always encourage you to leave your comments. If you have questions, inquiry, challenges, critique, I'm open to that. I'm open to critique as well on how to improve our performance, our delivery, our general output and performance on this podcast. So criticism allows us to improve. We take away the good part. We can decipher the bad and the good and we can take away what is wrong. But we need criticism to do much better. So we encourage you for always coming on the watch. Continue to like, share, and follow. We appreciate you. Me take this part of my bread before we close up. Yeah. Dirty your session. Mhm. So, guys, we would like to bring this podcast to a close. Thank you for following. Thanks for the support. Join us for our subsequent podcast. Thank you. Bye.